everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another book review video. Today, as usual, I will be reviewing two books. One is called Sex and Coffee by Erika Lee. Don't demonetize me. And the other book is A History of Madness by Rebecca Crunden, which is the sequel to A Touch of Death. And both of those books are part of a pentalogy, which is 5 books, so that's book 2. But I'm going to start off with Sex and Coffee by Erika Lee. This one I read in January, and from page 25 I was just hooked. So I'm going to read the synopsis. At the tender age of 21, Destiny Jones had everything going for her. A promising acting career, loving boyfriend, a scholarship to NYU, but it wasn't enough to quiet the self-doubt that plagued her. She would have to lose it all to find herself. This novel spans the 25 years between September 1994 and June 2019. It's woven together as a dual narrative and told from the perspective of star-crossed lovers Destiny and Matthew. Destiny's diary entries span the agonizing 20-year aftermath of their eventual split. So this is a romance, technically, and it was so intriguing to me, the way that it was written through love letters from Matthew. Well, not all of them were love letters, but they were letters that they had written. It was a letter that he had written to her while she was at NYU in 1994, and they were long distance, and there was a lot of stuff that kind of went on, and you get to kind of, and then, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, I'm trying to remember everything. So Destiny's diary entries are later on, but the book starts off with her writing a letter to Matthew, and it was so bittersweet, but I really felt for Destiny, and there were multiple reasons why, but especially during that first letter, oh my gosh, it was heartbreaking, and it really goes to show that, like, you know, self-doubt can ruin so many things if you're not careful. You know, it can just do so much. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil anything, but I do try to keep these reviews as spoiler-free as possible. However, with both of these books, there are some triggers that I do want to mention. So with Sex and Coffee, luckily there isn't any blatant disturbing scenes that, like, it's not really written like as it's happening because they're diary entries, right? And letters. So it's written a lot differently, and in my mind a bit better. It's a bit better way of handling it than other authors have in the past. So the triggers for Sex and Coffee are topics of abuse, abortion, drugs, and alcohol. Destiny does go into detail about how good she feels when she's high, stuff like that. It's not a good mindset, obviously, for her to be in. So if those kinds of topics are something that you think is going to be a problem, maybe skip this one. The topic of abortion is very, very mild. It doesn't go into detail. Whenever it's talked about, from what I remember, it's from Matthew's perspective, and so you're not, and like how he's saying that, like, you know, this was a big decision and, you know, you must feel terrible about it, that sort of thing. So we don't actually, like, there is no on-page abortion scene, which is really good. I'm sorry if you hear squealing in the background. My daughter is playing with her little Paw Patrol watch that she got for Christmas, and she loves it, so she's just giggling away on the monitor there. But the topics of abuse are mostly, again, from what I remember, it's been a while since I've read it, so my memory is a little bit rusty, but from what I remember, it mostly focused on like an abusive relationship aspect. There was something that Destiny wrote about in one of the entries of her being followed, but the part that I will kind of spoil here, in order to make the trigger warning make sense, is that, you know, the guy, they stop at a gas station, so he pulls up to, and nothing major happens. Just want to put that out there. He kind of like, he's mad, but then he just drives away angry. There's nothing, my goodness, she's very noisy today. I'm so sorry if you hear random noise. I can't help but smile whenever she's happy. But that was a funny noise. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep this serious. I promise. I'm just gonna turn the volume down a little bit. Maybe there we go. That should be good. So, and there was another more specific instance of I don't even really know if it would be, well, I guess it would be considered being molested, but it happened really odd. I really don't want to get into details about it. If you are curious about it, and you're wondering why I'm having such a hard time kind of figuring out, like, well, what on earth, like, I don't even know what to say about this, because it is a bit more strange, and I think it definitely still classifies as her being molested, but it's not, again, it's very brief, it's very, it's not very graphic at all, and it's kept, well, brief and short are the same thing, but it's kept very short. It's not severe, but if knowing all of that, you don't think that this would be a book for you, no pressure to read it. I personally really enjoyed it because, oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot about what I was saying earlier. If you have questions about what I'm referring to, comment down below and I will reply to your comment and let you know more specific details. More than I'm wanting to say in video, because I don't monetize my videos anyways, but like I don't want YouTube to like flag this video because I'm mentioning it. And then, you know, it's just, I just don't want that to happen, because I like making videos, it's fun, and to have like a video flagged, I can imagine, would just really suck, so I don't want that. But anyway, and that goes for all of my videos. At any points, if you have questions about books that I'm talking about, specific triggers, and you're wanting to know more details, please don't be afraid to ask me. I can go back and double check, or, you know, something. I will do my best to inform you guys on the specifics of triggers if you are curious. So one of the reasons why I really liked this book actually is because I really felt a connection to Destiny, more so in the beginning of the book, and then as time went on, I could see it's like, okay, I'm not relating as much, but I still had a lot of sympathy for her, and I still was cheering for her, and I just wanted her to do well, and, you know, you kind of see the mistakes that she makes, and it breaks your heart. And, you know, with both Destiny and Matthew, like, this is not a romance novel to have as like your couple goals, you know what I mean? That's not the case at all. It is a very bittersweet love story that is just, it's a lot more complicated than your typical romance novel, and that's one of the things that I liked about it, because I find when I read romance novels, I have a lot harder of a time actually enjoying it, because it just seems so cliche and so, like, You know what I mean? So I'm typically not a romance reader, but this one really caught my attention because it seemed really different, and it was. It lived up to my expectations. And Destiny and Matthew both have their issues. They both have their points of being, I don't know if Matthew's judgments and, well, no, maybe not judgments is the right word, but his actions and his words, I don't know if that would count as emotional abuse. I probably feel like it would. He seems to be like kind of gaslighting her a little bit, and stuff like that, but there is mention of like Destiny physically harming him and stuff like that. So both characters, both Destiny and Matthew, have their flaws. Very unhealthy relationship. It's something that's very interesting because I feel like it is pretty realistic for someone who, not realistic in the fact that like, oh, that's how a relationship should look, because it shouldn't. It should not look like that at all. But I think it's realistic in the fact that, you know, there are a lot of people who act like that and who think it's okay, and it really just brings a whole new light to like the genre of romance, or and you know, like these topics, and it's just so intriguing to me that she wrote this the way that she did. And this is very much an 18 plus book, okay? At the beginning it starts off not so vulgar, but then as it goes on, it gets a lot vulgar. Very, very vulgar. And there were points where I was a little taken back by how vulgar it was. It got to be a lot really quick because, like I said, it didn't start off that way, so it was a little unexpected. Also, wanted to mention, Destiny in her diary entries does write about sleeping with some people, some men, while she is intoxicated with either drinking or drugs. Now, for me personally, this was not a problem. This was not a trigger because it was something that she was kind of wanting to do anyways, but she just used alcohol and drugs to get her to a point where she had like the courage to make a move on these guys. I don't know. But so in my mind, it's easier for me to cope with and deal with because I know that she would have wanted that anyways if she was sober. So, but I know that that's kind of a gray area. There's kind of some fine lines between okay and not, especially with a lot of people. So again, make the judgment for yourself, but I really enjoyed this book, and if you can handle all of that, I highly recommend it, and I rated it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Now, A History of Madness by Rebecca Crunden. Oh my gosh. Oh, this series is just, it is blowing me away. I loved the first one, as you all know. If you've seen my, not my last video, but a book review, but the one before that, I mentioned it. And it is awesome. So, I'm not going to read the synopsis for A History of Madness because, 1, it's kind of lengthy. 2, I don't want to spoil anything because of the fact that this is a series, and I'm not going to be reading the synopsis for book 3 either when I want to read it and review that one as well, because I know that synopsis definitely contains spoilers. I guess A History of Madness synopsis doesn't contain really that many spoilers, but it kind of does, so you gotta kind of be careful when it comes to a series. But the first book kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, it kind of switched. No, it was told from Kitty's perspective. That's a nickname for one of the main characters. Her full name is Catherine, but everyone just calls her Kitty. And her journey with Nate. And so this book is told from Nate's perspective. Now this book is a lot darker than the first one. And there are a lot of different topics and things that are brought up that could be very triggering. There is OCD, PTSD, abusive relationship, which is only mentioned in this book. In the first one, near the end, it went into more detail there. But the thing that I love about Rebecca Crunden's writing is the fact that she includes, and I'll continue this trigger warning list in a minute, she includes all of these things that are triggering. However, she keeps it to a minimum. She goes into enough detail that you understand what's going on, you understand the weight of the situation, and how it is affecting the characters. And then she's done. That is so much more preferable than like when I read 22 Scars. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna compare a little bit, yes, because you already know my thoughts on 22 Scars if you've watched my previous book review video, but the fact that like she constantly dragged everything out and whatever, and it's like, I don't need to know that many details. You know what I mean? Like, this is already a triggering topic, you gotta be sensitive about it, and Rebecca Crunden is very sensitive in her writing with this, and it is really, really good, the way that she does it. So I feel like the way that she does it makes it appropriate to have these things in the story affecting the characters as part of the plot, because you can't write about this kind of a story without there being some sort of trauma involved. Because of the corrupt government, because of their life on the run, because of all of this, there is trauma involved. But again, she writes about it in such a good, brief way that it made it okay for me personally. And again, I understand not everyone is like that, and that is totally okay. But there were a few points where I was reading this book and it got to one of those disturbing moments, and I was starting to get to a point of like, okay, do I start skipping this now, or what, how much longer this can go on? And right when I thought it was like, okay, I need to be done, it ended. So very, very brief, only like 2 paragraphs at most usually, and it makes it so much easier to read, and it makes it a lot easier to skip over too. If something you're reading is bothering you, you can very easily skip it. You don't have to flip through a million pages in order to skip over this disturbing scene. So now I forget which triggers I've mentioned already. I know I mentioned the abusive relationship, PTSD, OCD, right? And then there is actually an on-page abortion that takes place in this book. And I want to make something clear, because of the situation that the characters are in. The character who wants the abortion, she does not go and do it in a medical facility. It is not done by a doctor. And that was hard for me to read. I had a hard time with it, especially as someone who is a mom. That was a lot. So at that point, after I read that, I did have to put this book down for a day or so, because I needed some time to recover from that. So it is pretty brutal. So keep that in mind. And one thing that Rebecca did mention to me is that there is an on-screen fight between Nate and the abuser from the abusive relationship that I mentioned before. Again, it's brief, but it is pretty brutal, but it's short, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to read it, and I was actually planning on skipping it because she was kind enough to provide me the page numbers of that scene, which were a little incorrect because I guess Google Play Books numbers their pages a little bit differently, so it was a little bit later than what she had mentioned, but because she had given me those page numbers, I was able to know, okay, this is a scene that's coming up. It's not on this page, but it's coming up. And so I was able to prepare for it better than I would have if I hadn't known the page numbers, so that was really good. And that brings me to my next thing that I did want to mention about Rebecca specifically, not necessarily the book, is that I asked her on Twitter through DMs if it was okay if I mentioned this, and she said yes. So she was kind enough to reach out to me and ask me about like my triggers and stuff like that, and if there was anything that I wanted to know more information about. And so I told her what my triggers were, and she provided me with the information and how detailed it is in the book. And she had said that it was okay if you guys are watching this video and you're curious about this and you want to know more, that you can feel free to DM her. I will have her Twitter name on the screen, and so feel free to DM her, ask her questions. She cares about her readers enough to, reach out and want to help with the triggers, so that if you are interested but you are concerned, just DM her and she'll help you the same way that she helped me, which I highly appreciate because it is so rare to find an author that cares to that extent to do that kind of thing. So anyways, this book had me guessing to the very end, and it might have seemed predictable to some people, but for me, I can be quite naive with books sometimes and like where plot twists are gonna go, but like because I'm a writer myself, I'm like, okay, we're getting near the end of the book here. This is going a little too well. What's gonna happen? And so I started making a bunch of guesses, and then, one scene passed. It was like, okay, well, that was not where she was going to take it. Okay, well, maybe she's going to do this instead. And then, nope, that wasn't the case either. And it was so cool. And I didn't clue in until, like, the second last page where she was going with the ending of this book. And as soon as I started reading it, and it clicked, and I was like that Joey meme. If I can find it, if I can find the GIF or GIF, whatever, I say GIF, I'll put it somewhere up on the screen, but I was like that, and I was just beside myself, and then the book ended, and I was like, no! I was so, oh my gosh, I was so happy, but confused. I'm like, okay, how did this even happen? How did we get here? But it was so good. I am so invested in this whole story. It is incredible. Very easily my favorite books so far. I think A Touch of Death is still number one for me, but A History of Madness follows closely. And I'm really excited to read the third one to see how everything kind of happened. And what was really cool is with the beginning of A History of Madness, it kind of went backwards a little bit because, like I said, A Touch of Death is told from Kitty's perspective. And Or I feel like it does switch to Nate's a little bit. I don't fully remember. It's been too long. I'd have to look at it again, but and so the ending of the book was from her perspective, and then when you start A History of Madness, it goes back in time a little bit so that you know what Nate was doing in the meantime while Kitty was going through what she was going through, and then it kicks off to Nate's story fully from his perspective. And there were a lot of surprising elements in there. I did have a couple of critiques. One is a bit more specific, and it's the one I want to mention right now, is that the character who is pregnant, they say that she says that she's only like a couple of weeks along, and that kind of bothered me a little bit, because when you're only 2 weeks along, I don't know if Rebecca knows this, but when you're only 2 weeks in your pregnancy, when a doctor says like how many weeks you are in pregnancy, they go by the date of your last period. Okay, sorry about that. I had to go and check on my daughter because she started crying, but she's all good now. So as I was saying, when you're only considered 2 weeks pregnant, that's only about when a woman ovulates usually. So if she was 2 weeks pregnant, she wouldn't actually be pregnant yet, if that makes sense. But given the situation that she was in and the events that happened in the previous book, I kind of made an excuse for it. I was like, okay, well, understanding all of that, maybe it has to do with some of that stuff that happened, and she had doctors looking after her, and so maybe she found out early. I don't know, but that was a little bit of a critique. It was a little bit unimmersive for me, because normally the earliest you can find out that you're pregnant is about 5 weeks, so it would have been farther along. But so that was my first critique that I wanted to mention. My second one was that it kind of had seemed like, I don't know, it felt like there was a lot of political stuff kind of clumped together. And I mean, maybe not all political, but like social justice stuff. And don't get me wrong, I am all for including social justice stuff in a book because it's important. It's social justice, it's justice, it's important to write about, right? But it all kind of happened and was mentioned really kind of quickly and in a short amount of time, and I felt like I would have preferred to have heard more. I would have preferred to have heard the characters bonding over something else, and then maybe bring that up later, or maybe have brought it up before, or maybe just space it out a little bit more. I think that's my biggest issue with it, is that it was all clumped together, and it just kind of seemed like it was thrown in there just to be thrown in there, and that I'm not a big fan of. But I do understand its place in the story, and I appreciate it. But yeah, I think for the situation that they were in, it just seemed a little bit out of place in that specific part of the book, because this book is not broken up in chapters. It is broken up in parts. I think it's like 4 different parts. I could be wrong, but so I feel like if it had been mentioned earlier in that part of the book, or maybe in a separate part of the book entirely, I don't know, but I feel like maybe near the end of the book might have been better, because I don't want to mention too much, but just because of the circumstances that they were in near the end of the book were a lot different than around the middle. So I think that would have been a better place to have mentioned that. But yeah, that's just my personal preference, and yeah, so that was my thoughts on Sex and Coffee by Erika Lee and A History of Madness by Rebecca Crunden. If you enjoyed this book, consider giving a like or subscribing, and I will see you in my next one.